today. I actually have a whole team of folks that I'm really excited to introduce you all to. But to start off with, my name is Vincent Chang. I'm the program manager for the Inclusive Leader program coming up in March here at UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education. Thank you all for joining us today. We do have an instructor joining us, so you'll hear from her in a little bit. I know she's also having some trouble joining, so we might actually skip through some slides and then get back to her part. But to start off with, our program begins March 3rd, and I'd like to start with an overview of what you can expect in today's session. So we know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the Inclusive Leader this morning. As a thank you for joining us live, everyone who is attending this information session live will qualify for a $100 information session discount. So please stay until the end of today's session so you can learn more about how to redeem that offer. Also, we will introduce you to our team of program staff so you know who to reach out to after today's session. If you still have questions, we'll also introduce you to our amazing team of instructors. I'm really excited for you to work with them. And then we'll have a content preview with Corey Sasnock. I apologize for that typo. And then we'll also go over a program overview. So we'll talk about the cost, the dates, the schedule. You can know what to expect in the program. We will have time at the end for questions and answers. So if you think of questions along the way, please go ahead and submit them through the designated Q&A function. That way, we'll be able to better keep track of all your questions as we go along. If you do send questions in the chat, we'll try to make sure that we don't miss them. But if you can remember to send them through the Q&A, that'll help us keep track and make sure that we answer your questions. And then finally, we'll finish with information about next steps and how to enroll. So to start off with, I'd like to share this slide that has our student services information. They're available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and you can call or email them. They're a great team of people. So I know they're really busy. If you call them and get voicemail, please don't get discouraged. I know we've all been there. They actually do answer those messages. So please go ahead and leave a message. They will call you back. Alternatively, you could reach out directly to me or Lupe. Lupe Cox is our program representative, and she's monitoring the chat today. And so you can send us an email too if you'd like to learn more about the program. But for quick questions or for help to get enrolled directly, you could reach out to Student Services or do that through our website. And then also joining us on the call today, I'm excited to introduce you all to Jill Parrish. She's the Director of Business and Leadership Programs. Hi, Jill. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, good morning, Vincent. Thank you. And thanks all for joining. We apologize, we were a few minutes late. I'm sure you can all understand Zoom glitches at this point, and we were all loaded up, ready to go, and Zoom kicked us off. So we had to rejoin and start all over, but we're here now. So thanks very much. My name is Jill Parrish. Like Vincent shared, I am the Director of Business and Leadership. I'm really excited about this program. It's definitely a passion project for many of us. We've been doing leadership programs for a really long time and really wanted to explore how we could combine some of the diversity and inclusion components that are so important right now with leadership development. And so we've worked on this really hard with our instructors. And I think it's just going to be a really amazing, impactful program. So I'm very, very excited. And I want to introduce our instructors to you now by way of this slide, and then Corey is actually with us today. Kristen, Lisa, and Corey are three of our most amazing instructors we have here at UC Davis. This program will be taught by all of these folks, and this is, I can't emphasize enough, this will not just be didactic. These folks are absolutely skilled in small group activities, in facilitating discussion, and making sure that your learning is interactive. You will not just be sitting and listening to people talk at you. They're really, really terrific instructors. They all have really interesting backgrounds, and they all differ quite a bit. So we're really excited to have all of them on this program. And they definitely were hand selected. You know, we have about 50 instructors, And we really thought about who would bring, perspectives, different perspectives, to really make this program as powerful as it could be. So now I want to introduce Corey to you, and Corey is going to share a little bit about her content.
Hi, everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you this morning, and I'm super excited about this program. I think one of the things that in teaching diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging type of content over the last dozen years or so is the opportunity to challenge ourselves to engage in this type of material. And so with that, I'm going to have an opportunity to give a little bit of a sampler in regard to how I approach this content, but more than that, the two classes that I'll be delivering for you. So one of the things that's really helpful to understand my teaching style around this content is to set community agreements with all the classes that I teach around diversity and inclusion. And it sets the context for everyone to come in with their own viewpoints and their own process of where they are in the journey. So that's what I feel is it's a welcoming environment for everyone, regardless of where you are, and understanding diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging type of topics and learning. And so community agreement starts out in each of the classes that I'll be delivering around really assuming good intention on other people's part. We're going to be engaging in challenging conversations that are going to challenge even your own personal perception of yourself. And so assume good intentions on others, and also own the impact if you inadvertently happen to step into it with a conversation, because there'll be lots of breakout room discussion, a lot of time to reflect on where you are. And also this idea of being courageous and vulnerable. So quite often some of the conversations will lend itself to different points of view. And you may not feel like your point of view is politically correct. And part of the process of stepping into that is an opportunity to challenge your own thinking and to maybe turn your thinking on its side. And part of that courage is also being vulnerable and possibly being judged by others. But as much as possible is you can be courageous and vulnerable at the same time. It's going to help the learning process. All of us are coming with our own experiences. And so I like to establish a teacher learner environment where everyone's a teacher and everyone's a learner. And that gives the whole dynamic of exchanges and the opportunity to be more engaged in imparting your knowledge and wisdom, as well as asking questions and being curious. And all that. But it is content that is a little bit uncomfortable and sometimes a lot uncomfortable. I teach a lot of leadership development classes, and I would have to say that the discomfort from this type of content versus that type of content almost is like night and day. But yet, if you sign up for the classes, you're doing it because you want to learn more about it. And so if you're uncomfortable, it means you're heading in the right direction. So be comfortable with the uncomfortable. We're all on our own journey. Come as you are, wherever you're at. The important part is challenging your own thinking and taking baby steps in a direction, and also to be curious and a little less judgmental. And when I say less judgmental, because it's hard to turn off our judgmental mind, because that's the way we're wired, but be less judgmental of yourself, but also of others. And so again, the judgment brain is always operating. And so I think that sets the context for open environment to explore, to be okay with wherever you're at, and to engage in conversations that may feel uncomfortable. So I wanted to set that up because I think that's a really important part of coming into this process of learning about how to be able to be an inclusive leader. We could go to the next slide. So when we talk about allyship and being an ally, one of the things that I think is really important is really what prevents us from being a true ally. And so if you have an opportunity to put some thoughts into chat, I'd like to hear your viewpoints about it. What prevents you from being able to step in for somebody else on somebody else's behalf and be able to be an ally to them in a situation that you feel isn't right. And our little brains are like, well, I don't really know if I should step in. It's really none of my business. I don't want to step over somebody and take away their voice. So if you have an opportunity to put any thoughts in chat around what might prevent you from being an ally, I would love to see that. I'm just going to wait a couple of seconds here because I think people are gathering their thoughts. Thank you. I love that. Trust, maybe. Yeah, so trusting the situation, maybe trusting your own judgment, trusting whether or not you're going to be taken down by the other person that's involved in the situation, being judged by others, this idea of, what is it your business to be able to step into the situation? Concern of what others think and different points of views and beliefs. And the situations that you might face in being an ally will be very blatant to very subtle. And so some of this is like, when it's more subtle, it's really easy to let it go by. And there are different points of view, and there are different ways that people could look at it. And so part of this class will be around how to be able to do this based on the context of the situation. A lot of it has to do with the relationships you have with the others involved. It could be complete strangers. Sometimes it's just challenge our thinking about is that if you don't step in situations that is wrong and that maybe disagrees with you're actually complicit in the actual situation that's happening. And so as we're working to be a more inclusive leader, how can you step into a situation in a way that is appropriate, that may challenge yourself a little bit more, and that allows you to possibly make mistakes because you're not always going to get it right, but know that you're heading in a direction of being an inclusive leader and saying this is wrong. And it can be a very subtle way. It can be as simple as inviting people into conversation versus calling someone out, which is what my preferred mode of operation is. Don't always have to be overly aggressive or counter the aggression, but it could even be a matter of asking curious questions. Thank you for the chat. I love the input on that. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so a definition here, allyship is a lifelong process of building relationships based on trust, consistency, accountability with marginalized individuals or groups. And so how can we be an ally that's actually building relationships with both someone that we might perceive to be the perpetrator as well as the person that might be the recipient or the victim of something that may have gone wrong? And how do we step into that and also build our reputation of being someone that's going to step up when something seems wrong? We'll go on to the next slide. Ultimately, when we talk about inclusive leadership, and this comes from a book by the same name by Jennifer Brown, she looks at 4 different phases of being an inclusive leader, from being unaware to being an advocate. And so as you look at unaware, aware, active, and advocate, there's a slight divide or tipping point between 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And 3 and 4 is really this high risk personal exposure, putting yourself on the line and really taking on a much more vulnerable, courageous position around being an advocate, where you're proactively and consistently involved, bringing about change and preventing it at a systemic level. You're stepping in, you're being visible. Unaware and aware are much more lower risk and much more private. So as you look at being aware, you're playing a role to educate yourself, but you may not necessarily be vocally or actively or visibly stepping out there. And so we're going to explore this idea of how do you move from one direction to another. I would love for you to put in chat kind of your personal evaluation of where you think you are right now, just a number, 1, 2, 3, or 4. in regard to where you are on your inclusive leadership journey. And there's no wrong answer here at all, because wherever you're at, as I said before, is where you're at, and that's completely okay. So I love that. Okay, so we've got some 2s and some 3s. And again, the most important thing, 2.5, I love it. I love splitting the difference. Okay, Marie, you got a 4, great, and several 3s. And so this idea of exploring being active and an advocate to being aware, again, it's about taking baby steps in a direction. None of us are going to be fully baked in this content. And the content is so deep around how do you learn more about inclusion and diversity, and how do you learn more about equity? And so I always think of it as a really long journey, but the most important thing is taking steps in the direction. And so I think personally around diversity and inclusion content, you could get a PhD in this content and still not feel like you know everything that you could know about it. So thank you so much for that. I love the input, and it gives a great idea that there's always room to move forward on this. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay. As we talk about power and influence, it's a really important overlay when we talk about being an inclusive leader. Leadership by position can be an abuse of power very easily. Just by your pure position of being a leader in an organization. And we're talking about formal leaders versus informal leaders, because I believe all of us have a leadership role to play. But when you talk about formal leadership, where you are in a managerial position, where you have others reporting to you, there is inherent power in that. And you can use your power for good, or you can use your power that feels abusive. So is power really a good thing or not? And so in the power and influence class, we'll really have an opportunity to explore the dynamics of power and the dynamics of influence. So in chat, I would love for you to share what your perspectives are about power. And when you hear the word power, what do you think of? Maybe you think about a person, maybe you think about an image, maybe you think about your power spirit animal. Okay, so Janet, thank you. This idea of control, and again, control can be good or it can be overly controlling. Both sides, good and abusive, yes. And so power sometimes can have a really negative connotation, but I'd like to challenge that and think that power actually can be a really positive thing. And authority, so power and authority kind of go hand in hand, and that's really about the position power. So thank you so much for that. So the last slide I'm going to share on this kind of quick sampler is just an opportunity to share a perspective around differences between power and influence. And so if you look at this line by line, power is the authority to get things done. We all need power because in working, we have to get things done. We're responsible for the things that are on our plate. And so sometimes we have more power and authority to do that, and other times less. Influence is really this opportunity to impact on the beliefs and actions of others. So without this kind of forcing, so the power of authority is more of a forcing feature, where the influence is really people bringing people along. Power might not generate respect because people are forced to obey. In this idea of unequal power, where influence really generates respect out of your own beliefs and change of heart. Power does not contain any emotional feelings without the presence of an authoritative figure. And influence is like magic, where those being influenced keep working even when the influential person is no longer present. Power is positional and usually comes with rank and file. Influence is personal, and it's due to who the person is and not necessarily what rank they hold. Power pushes people and influence persuades people. And then power is imposed where influence does not require position or authority, and it is wholeheartedly accepted. I like to think about kind of these different elements as being on a continuum. And sometimes when you're in a leadership position, sometimes you do have to use power in a very authoritative way. And other times you want to more default to influence, to bring people along, engage their hearts, minds, and souls in the process. And as we look at power and influence in regard to overlaying around diversity, equity, and inclusion, a big part of inclusion and equity has to do with the exercise of power and those who are in power versus those who don't have as much power. And how do we bring up those that feel like they may be marginalized and bring them more into the fold and more into the conversation, to have them be more included, to have them be seen, and have them feel like they have a sense of belonging in organizations. And ultimately, I think that's what we all want as we come to work. So with that, I'm just going to stop for a moment, push a pause button. And Vincent, I don't know if we have time for anyone that may want to register any questions in chat.
Sure. Corey, thank you so much for giving that preview of the content. I really enjoyed hearing it. And, you know, for the participants joining us today, that inclusive leader continuum model that Corey shared on an earlier slide, you'll notice in the program that keeps coming back. I do really like the person that replied 2.5, because I think I'm the same way. I would split the difference. I think on, you know, with some communities and some issues, I might consider myself a 3, but with other underrepresented or marginalized communities, I might think of myself more as a 2 or even a 1. And Corey, I really like that you said, you know, you could even get a PhD in this information and there's still so much room to learn and grow. And I think that's a core philosophy of this program, that everyone, no matter where they're at, has room to continue to grow and learn. And so I'm so excited for people to discover that, working with you and Kristen and Lisa as well. But yes, for the participants joining us, if you have questions for Corey, feel free to put them in the Q&A section. We'll also make sure to save time for questions at the end as well. But I'll go ahead and move on to this next slide here to cover some program logistics. So the program will start March 3rd and go until May 13th. That's 8 live class sessions on Zoom. So it's online. You can access it from anywhere. You know, you have an online connection. If you show up in sweatpants, who knows, right? It's really designed to be convenient and accessible for you. We'll cover the schedule in a more detailed schedule in a few slides, but it is 5 full-day classes and 3 half-day classes. And this program, one of the goals is really to equip participants with takeaways, actual models and strategies that you can apply to your workspace the very next day. And I think Corey also emphasized that in her content preview. She really emphasized active learning. And Jill mentioned that earlier as well. It really isn't 8 live classes of lecture. It really is interaction, talking with your classmates, doing personal reflection, being in discussion groups, and beyond breakout rooms, the program is also structured to have pods, which are sort of mini cohorts within the program that you navigate all these concepts with, and you can really unpack them outside of class as well. And so outside of these classes, it's designed to, the program is designed to have minimal outside classroom work if you're very busy, but you really get what you put into it. So if you do decide to spend a little more time with those takeaway strategies and models and really apply them to your workspace and see how they work out, then you can really bring that to the discussion in the following class. But on the bottom of the slide, I do want to talk about the cost for the program, which is $2,995, but we will talk about later in the presentation discounts that you might be interested in, besides the information session discount that everyone attending live today qualifies for. On this next slide, I do want to go over the learning objectives for the course, because I really want to, again, emphasize that it is an active learning model of teaching and learning in the program. So there's a lot of reflection, but beyond being comfortable talking about these concepts, we really want to emphasize this idea that people are sort of culturally fluent, and they develop that over the course of the program. So it's not just understanding what those terms might mean, but being able to really engage in those discussions by going through the course. So this slide has a more detailed breakdown of the schedule. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Jill to talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vincent. So we were really strategic about the schedule. We went back and forth. Do we do half day? Do we do full day? And so ultimately we landed on this, what you might call a third or a 3/4 of a day. And most of our days are 9:30 to 3. You can see that there's one day that has 2 half-day sessions combined. And so that's one a little bit longer day. The reason that we didn't go to full half days is because we find that when you're talking about topics that can be a little bit harder for people to talk about, often people that aren't as comfortable speaking out, if they go away for the lunch hour, they're able to reflect, they're able to kind of think things through. And then more often than not, they can come back after the lunch hour and feel more comfortable talking, feel more comfortable contributing. Whereas if we had a half a day class, those folks might, log off at noon and they might think of things that they want to say, but the class has already ended for the day. So we did a 9:30 to 3. You'll have a 1-hour lunch break in the middle. So hopefully it's not too much time away from your work. You'll have a little bit of time in the morning, a little bit of time in the afternoon, and of course your lunch hour. You'll notice that the classes are all listed there to the left. Every one of these classes is maybe not that different from just regular leadership development, in the sense of you might see leading organizational change in a regular leadership development class. However, these classes are all created through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's really taking these concepts that we've all kind of probably learned about it some way throughout our career, and putting them in the lens of how can this be applied to create an equitable and inclusive workplace. So it will all have that lens. As I mentioned, a lot of interactive time, a lot of talking, a lot of discussion, a lot of case studies, all the things that you would want to really be able to dive into the content and really be able to understand it. In addition to what you see in front of you, you'll participate in pod groups. And those will meet 3 times during the period of March 3rd to May 13th. The pod groups will all meet 1 hour each time. So it'll be 3 1-hour meetings, and those times will actually be decided by the pods. Let me give you a little bit of background about what we're thinking there. Each pod group will have a facilitator, and that person will be there really just to kind of kick off the conversation. The pods will be small groups as far as folks in your class, but smaller groups, 3 to 4 people, 3 to 5 people, somewhere in that realm. And the reason for that is because we want to give you a chance to really dissect the content in a smaller group. There's things that you might not say in a larger group. There's things that you might not ask. Maybe you have a question, but you feel like you might offend somebody and you're nervous to do that in a larger group. The small pod groups will really give you the ability to dive into the content, to really get with your colleagues, find out, their take on things, and really talk through these issues and these concepts. So they'll all have a facilitator. The facilitator is not really necessarily there to provide any new content. The facilitator will be there maybe to provide some start off talking points. Sometimes there might be an awkward silence, and the facilitator will jump in, and kind of maybe help get that conversation going back again. So really they're just a little bit as someone to guide the conversation as you discuss with your pod. So again, there's no new content in these pod groups. There's no new assignments. You'll have really talking points, discussion points, and it'll be your time to really converse with your associates in your class on the concepts and how you can apply them at your workplace. Vincent, did I forget anything? Please feel free to tell me if I did.
I think that was a great overview of the program and how the pods work. I'm really excited for people to engage in those pods. So thank you, Jill, for giving that overview.
Perfect.
Yeah, and so here's a schedule, but for those of you joining us live, you don't have to write all of this down. It is on our website, and you can also email me directly, and I'm happy to follow up and send that to you. On this next slide, I do want to talk about discounts. I had mentioned those earlier. So some discounts that apply to this program, if you're a member of a professional association, like, for example, the Sacramento Area Human Resource Association, that would qualify you for 10% off tuition. We also offer a group discount. So groups of 3 or more get, I believe, a 10% discount. If you have a group of over 10, definitely feel free to email me and we can talk about that. We also offer an early enrollment discount. So if you enroll in the course 2 weeks before it starts, and it starts March 3rd. So if you enroll at least 2 weeks before, you could get $50 off if you want to use that discount. And then again, if you're attending this session live, then you would qualify for $100 off tuition. And that will be sent in the form of a discount code that I will email out after today's session. So if you attended live, then you qualify for that. Unfortunately, UC Davis policy doesn't allow us to combine or stack discounts, but you can definitely email me about your options. We can sort of crunch the numbers together, and I'm happy to talk to you about where you might get your biggest savings. So more information about how to finance this course. If you're interested, there are different loans and training funds that you might be eligible for. And I'm excited to introduce you all to Suzette Odom. She's in our student services department, and she's joining us today. Hi, Suzette.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Suzette, thank you so much for joining us. Suzette is my go-to person whenever I have questions about all these different loans or financing options. And so you can reach her through the student services email addresses or this phone number. Or if you'd like to forward your question to me, I'm happy to pass it on to Suzette and she can answer your question about these different funds.
Yeah, if you have any questions regarding the student loans, the lenders that we are partnered with would be College Avenue and Sally Mae Smart Option. I can also provide you with our website for financing that'll take you directly to the links for the loans. We also offer job training funds through the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act. And there's also SETA, and that is also available to you. And I can give you the links for those as well and who to contact. If you're a veteran or if you're a spouse of a veteran or a dependent of a veteran, we also offer the Veterans Education Benefits. I do suggest that if you're going to be using any of those funds or those programs, you definitely want to get started early on them because there is a process that you'll need to go through, but I can definitely help you with all that.
Thank you so much, Suzette.
Mm-hmm.
So on this next slide, we're finally at our Q&A portion of today's info session. I know people have been submitting questions in the Q&A or in the chat, so we'll go ahead and get to those. But while people are thinking of more questions, I'd like to leave this slide up because it has the student services contact information, the start date, and of course, my contact information as well. So you can email or call me. And again, I'm the program manager, so I can answer any follow-up questions that you have. But if you think of them right now, we do have one of the instructors, Corey, with us. So this is a great opportunity to get some of those questions answered live.
I do see one question in chat, Vincent, that I think Corey would be great for Corey. Corey, do you see that question and you want me to read it to you?
Let's see, is this the one with the questions on navigating the abuse of power or navigating toxic environments?
Exactly.
So when we talk about power and influence, we will definitely be talking about the abuse of power because that's within the context of around diversity and inclusion. and how to navigate toxic environments. We'll touch upon that. And certainly those will be also great opportunities to talk about that in your pods as well. So I think there's kind of different ways of being able to approach those questions. I hope that answers your question, Doraxix.
Thanks, Corey.
Corey, one question I got is if I'm not a manager or an executive, how could I benefit from going through the inclusive leader? Could you talk a bit about that?
I think all of us, as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, all of us play a role as a leader, regardless of where you sit in the organization. Some of us have more influence based on the roles that we play, or maybe how visible we are in the organization, our own personal power that we bring to it. But we all have influence, and we all have influence also to step into situations. So I would say lead from where you are is one of my favorite expressions, because we all serve as leaders every single day, and people take their cue from what we do and what others do and say, and also what we let pass by as well.
Great, thank you, Corey.
Yeah.
We have one question in the chat that I wonder Suzette might be able to provide some insight. The question is, are there any discounts for state employees for this program?
I believe so. I would definitely, I can look into that for you. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Suzette. So for the person that submitted that question, if you want to follow up through student services or email me, I'm happy to pass that on to Suzette and get that answered for you. One question we got is there sort of like a certificate of completion or anything else that's part of this Inclusive Leader program? There is a certificate of completion. It's a non-academic program, so there's no grades assigned, but there is a certificate of completion and a digital badge. So that's something that will be added to your professional profile, like on a network like LinkedIn, that indicates that you passed the course, and can demonstrate the skills and competencies that really speak to, different aspects of identity, engaging in these types of conversations. We got a question about continuing education units. I might have to look into that. Jill, off the top of your head, do you know if this program applies?
It's a little bit tricky because it kind of depends on who the governing body is. So for example, if you needed, continuing educational units for medicine or a health related profession, no, this would not count. It's possible this could count if you were trying to go towards an HR CEU units. Typically we do PDU, which is professional development units, which is pretty generic. So like I said, it kind of depends. If you do have a governing body and they're willing to work with us, we're happy to work with them. Sometimes it requires submitting, numbers of hours you've spent in courses or learning objectives, and we're totally happy to do that. It just sort of depends on whatever governing body you're looking for. If it's your employer as well, yes, we're happy to work with your employer and, and give you what you might need for that.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions coming through the chat or the Q&A. Panelists, and anything else that maybe we want to make sure we answer before we sort of wrap up for today? Oh, here's a question. Will recordings of each session be provided to participants? I don't believe sessions are recorded. Panelists, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think especially with the content that's covered in this program and the fact that it's so much of interactive learning and engagement live with classmates, with instructors, with facilitators, I think a recording just wouldn't really get that learning value out of it.
Yeah, you're right on. And actually, unfortunately, we cannot record because we are bound by student protection laws. And so we would have to get you all to essentially sign your life away saying that we could record. It's really not worth it. We want to make sure as well that if there are folks who have privacy concerns, that we're honoring that as well. So we will not be able to record these sessions. They will be live sessions. You could get the materials. So, you know, if you were looking for that, we could some materials, but we will not be recording them.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start closing up. And respect everyone's time. Again, thank you all for joining us today. If you're attending live, please look out for this follow-up email that I'll send out in a little bit. That'll include the information session discount code that people attending live qualify for. It'll also include the link to the program page so you can enroll online or again through student services by emailing them or calling them. You can also reach out to me directly by email or my colleague Lupe if you have any follow-up questions. I know I'm the type of person that thinks of questions after the fact, so I totally understand that. Feel free to reach out to me. And if you have questions for Suzette with different funding or financing options, you can also email me and I can direct your inquiry to her, or you could reach out to her through the student services contact information. So again, the program starts March 3rd. Thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in the program. Thank you.